I'm Travis. Thank you for being with us today on All Clear. I've got Alec Wands with me today. A very interesting young man. Alec is a podcaster as well. I'm going to let him do what podcasters do best, and that's talk. Tell us about yourself, Alec. Tell us what's going on, and thank you for being with us.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me on, Travis. I'm excited to be able to be here today. And I have an interesting background. So I don't come from a background in public safety. I come from a background actually in sport. So grew up playing for one of the top soccer academies in the country in Kansas City. And unfortunately didn't get a professional contract. So I came up to Marquette University to play Division I college soccer. Ended up having a career-ending injury there sophomore year, which kind of kickstarted me on the path to looking at what is life like after sport, where my senior year, I actually helped develop a mental health program for college student athletes. Since at that time, there was a lot of athletes who were committing suicide, which we also see a parallel in public safety. So trying to be able to make an impact there, built out a pilot program with the present university and didn't end up taking off. There was a lot of other criteria I'd overlooked. So we wanted to make sure if we're going to do it, we're going to do it right. But a great learning experience nonetheless. And after graduating there, I got my degree in exercise physiology. So I was a strength and conditioning coach at Exos and was working with NFL athletes as well as guys in NFL combine. So a great experience there. And it's always funny, a life path. You don't know where it's going to take you. And you realize that you really don't have control over a lot. But a mentor who I met in college actually ended up becoming CEO of Rebound, the current company I'm at, and brought me on where we help expedite the care of first responders. So almost like how do you see the right doctor in less time than Amazon Prime. We expanded our offering to be able to help cover cardiology, oncology, as well as some functional movement screen, nutrition, exercise plans. So very blessed to be here. And then beginning of this year, I wanted to be able to make a podcast, be able to give first responders and their departments a voice, especially after we saw what happened 4 years ago in Minneapolis, as well as just public safety in general. Recruit classes are smaller than they've ever been. So trying to be able to spread the word of how fulfilling a career in public safety can be and talk with chiefs about anything from life, leadership, recruitment, retention, even talking about relationships. So it's fun to be able to talk about not only public safety, but just the wisdom that these chiefs have gained. So I really appreciate you having me on here today.
Hey, no worries. When I was first learning about you, it's like, this guy's interesting. He's got a lot going on. So I figured, particularly with the fact that you've talked with how many chiefs you said, what, at least 17 or plus by now, and you've got a lot more lined up. So where are some of the chiefs from that you've had a chance to talk with?
Yeah, so right now I've had 17 episodes published, but I record about 2 to 3 a week because chiefs always have to reschedule for different stuff that comes up. So I always have one in the bank for the week coming up and now booked out through early 2025, which is exciting. But I've had Chief Baker on from Austin Fire Department. I've had Police Chief Paco Balderramo on um, in California. I'm gonna have John Butler on from the IFC coming up in 2 weeks here. Police Chief Eddie Garcia in Texas. Chief Rubin. So I've had some legends on. I was actually on with Deputy Commissioner Kaz Daughtry and Chief of Patrol John Chell from NYPD last week, which is crazy to hear what they go through in the largest law enforcement agency in the United States. So I've learned a lot from some very experienced individuals.
So when I listen to you talk about your background, it sounds a lot like you have focused on development. That seems like something that's kind of like a common thread through your life, through you playing sports and talking about injury prevention and so you're trying to make things better, make people better. And that's exactly what we do here at our podcast, is try to build a better firefighter by igniting that fire within. But of all these folks you've talked to, why don't you share with us some of the most important, I'm not going to say lessons, but most important facts or even lessons that you've taken away from what you've learned so far?
Yeah. So at the end of each podcast, I ask a question if you'd go back to the beginning of your career in public safety, what is one thing you wish you would have known then that you know now later on in your career? And there's some advice about investing early when it comes to finances. But a lot of the chiefs said that they didn't know that they wanted to be a chief. They just played it by ear. They would have been fine being a captain and getting to stay out in the field, maybe then doing more paperwork than they would have thought. But it's to enjoy the journey, right? Not just try and get to the destination, and finding out that the journey all along is the destination. To be able to prioritize relationships with your family, because it's really easy to get caught up in the fire service, other hobbies you have going on. I've learned some great stuff about relationships as well. My parents are divorced when I was younger, and I don't want that for myself in the future. So I appreciate some of these chiefs sharing some of their difficulties that they experience in relationships that I can learn from. And I think one of the amazing things about this is the chiefs you have on the podcast is a chief in Florida could listen to one in Washington, and it's just a one-sided conversation that you could put on your car. And a lot of these chiefs are at the top here where they have to branch out to find other people to empathize with, since you can't always do that within your department since you're at the top of the ladder then. So it's almost developing this connected network where public safety professionals can connect and learn from each other. And it's been a really great thing to see chiefs connecting who had never met before. So I just like to be able to connect people who are making a difference.
Yeah, that is a very important thing that you mentioned, that when we have a role of supervisory, a supervisory role or a leadership role in an organization, whether you're a company officer, chief officer, all the way to the chief, we all have a certain level that we can communicate with, because you never want to talk bad about someone that's of your level to anyone below you, because that's very destructive. And the service that you're providing is very important, because a lot of these guys, they deal with a lot of stress. They have a lot on them, and they need to vent it, and they need to have other people they can talk to. But you mentioned like the fact of marriage and how you've learned that they face challenges and things like that. Have you, in your experience, do you think that firefighters, first responders in general, tend to be very, or can be very self-destructive when it comes to how they deal with, say, mental stress, how they deal with PTSD, how they just deal with the ugly stuff we see? Do you think they become self-destructive when they deal with this sometimes?
I think it's a possibility. So we've seen a lot of parallels between sports and first responders, as well as what happens with some of the horrific events that are seen on the job in different ways that people cope. Personally, I coped with exercise and a lot of mental stress that I dealt with. After graduating college, I put on 35 pounds of all muscle, right? It was just I wasn't eating a lot. I was working out a ton, and that's how I let my stress go. Certain firefighters like to go out on ATVs and they'll get in a crash. That's how we see injuries sometimes, is people just blowing off steam off duty. Other times we see when someone's injured, for example, they choose to cope with different substances like alcohol
Hmm.
sometimes. And that's not only doesn't affect your mental health, your physical health, your emotional health. There's this huge umbrella of wellness with all these components underneath it. And you can always see if someone breaks their arm, but you can never tell what's going on in someone's mind all the time. We call it check up for the neck up, is how are you always checking on your buddies? Because let's face it, just being honest, in public safety and the fire service, law enforcement, the three top killers right now are cancer, heart disease, and suicides.
Yep.
So it's how are we helping address that? Because the suicide one's hard. You can't always see what's going on in someone, and it's just making people be more aware of, is your buddy acting different? You check up on them. Because the last thing you want is to say, I saw something off, but I never said anything.
Yep. Exactly. Craig Stalloway, a friend of mine who's in Colorado, we've had him on the podcast before. He's another podcaster. He uses the word, he doesn't like to use the word mental health. He uses the term mental fitness,
Mm,
and how when we deal with things, we have just, you're not going to go do your jar pat. You're not going to go do your physical training without having some type of workout routine in front of you. And it's the same. You have to get your mind, you have to start focusing on how to mitigate these things in your mind even before you see the bad stuff. And that's a problem, I think, that is very real in the fire service right now. And a lot of people don't take it serious because, hey, I'm not going to say anything because I'm a dude, I'm a man. I'm not going to say that. I can't let anybody see me weak. And that can be very destructive, as we were talking about. But yeah, no, that's one of the big things. And you also mentioned the fact that a lot of times when you talk with people, you don't know what's going on, and you don't want to be the one that says, I should have said something. What would you say from your experience, both professionally working for the organization you do, and then also working with firefighters and things like that that you've interviewed? What would you say are some of the things that we can do to maybe identify a firefighter that might be struggling, or a first responder that might be having some issues?
Yeah, just speaking from personal experience, this is not me providing advice to anybody when I say this, as I'm not like licensed in this
Sure,
area,
sure.
but I'll just share from personal experience. Sometimes just paying attention to smaller things that people do. Do they not come out as much? Do they feel a little more depressed? Are they talking more about problems? Do they not seem happy doing the things that they used to do? And just simply checking in on them and can just be asking how they're doing. And based on the question you ask someone, the answer is you're going to get. So don't just ask someone how you're doing. Everyone always says good. It's like, hey man, how have you been feeling lately? So sometimes just changing a couple words in a question, you're going to get a completely different answer. And I honestly say every change starts with you. So if you're hoping that someone opens up, you should probably be sharing something vulnerable about yourself to create that safe space. What's going on? I'm a big fan of Brene Brown. And one of the things she talks about the word is vulnerability. And everyone thinks it's like, ooh, it's this scary word. Like I'm going to be vulnerable. It's so exposing, weak in a way. But I challenge anyone listening here to think of a situation in your life where you've had to be vulnerable, but not courageous at the same time.
Hmm.
Being vulnerable takes courage.
Yes.
So when you show someone that it's okay, that if you can be courageous and maybe share something about you that others might not know and could be maybe perceived initially as, whoa, I didn't know that was going on. It's really funny the response you're going to get because people are going to be drawn to you and then open up themselves. So I always like to say, be the change that you want to see. And sometimes you have to be the one to take that first step.
Yes, that is very true, and that vulnerability is something that I think is a cultural thing, not just among men, but especially among firefighters. We're not going to tell anybody how we really feel. I'm tough. I can do what I have to. I was talking to a friend of mine who is with Charlotte here, not too far from us, and he was making the comment that the guys that he trains with that are not necessarily with Charlotte, he's got another group that he does some. I think it's almost like fools training with, and they always say I love you before they leave. And the first time I heard that, I was like, hey man, that's weird. But then the after he explained it, and then he looked at me and said, when was the last time you told a full grown man other than your dad that you love him? I was like, there have been a few that are not family that have helped me through hard times. So being able to express those types of things are very important. And I know that seems touchy feely. Somebody's probably getting ready to try to flip the knob off on the podcast. No, hang tight. It gets better, I promise. But those are all things that I think that we have to have cultural change with in the fire service. And that's one thing that I think we really do struggle with a lot. And maybe you've noticed that from talking to chiefs because these tend to be the older guys that have been around longer. Do you think they struggle with the changes that we see, such as that being vulnerable and open, or do you think they're pretty easy to go with it?
I think from what I've seen, the older, because I'm 25 years old, for those of you who don't know listening here, I think from what I've seen from some of the older generation is that there is still a little bit of that, not as much wanting to be able to share what's going on as might be seen as a weakness. Personally, being part of the younger generation, it's cool to see that more people are opening up. And I know that we just say how it is here. Women tend to do a better job at talking to each other about their feelings and stuff like that. And I saw a study recently that there could be a reason why they might have an average lifespan that's longer than males. When you look at the documentary Blue Zones, when they're talking about where do the most centenarians live, it's the diet, the exercise, but the thing they put at the top was the social relationships you have with
Yep.
others. And men, like, let's be fair, you could go out golfing with someone, spend a whole day with them, and you ask, how's life? You don't really get too deep. Girls are going to ask each other anything. And I read this the other day, and it was like, when's the one time that normally men receive flowers in their lives? And it's at their funeral.
Yep.
It's almost like you said here with the last time you said you love you to a grown man. You never know when the last time you're going to see someone. They could go out on a call and you could never see them again. So no matter how bad the fight, the disagreement that you're in, it is so not worth leaving like that because you would not be able to forgive yourself if they went out on a run, or heck, if they even went home for the night and didn't wake up the next day sleeping. You would not let yourself go for experiencing something like that. So I always like to treat every time like it's the last that you see someone because you don't know what's going to happen when you guys leave from what you're doing together.
Yep, that is very true. That is a good point. We've talked about the mental health, the emotional health part of for being a first responder, but let's hit the turn signal and make a hard right hand turn here. Let's talk about the physical stuff that's going on with firefighters right now. It seems like that's where the company and the organization you're working for now is leaning more toward getting expedient service for first responders, whether it be mental health, get them to an oncologist, get them to a cardiologist. Why do you think that is an important thing for us to look at from a leadership perspective and also just in general from the fire service? Because I'll be the first to admit I am not the most active person at going to the doctor. I need to be near dead before I go, or at least that's how I used to be. I'm getting a little better. But how do you think what you guys are doing in trying to make those connections, patient to doctor, why do you think that's an important thing that we need to be looking at as well?
Wow, do you have a couple hours?
I can give you a few minutes.
Yeah. When you look at the largest part of a department's budget, it is their largest asset. It's the personnel. It's the people. I know trucks are getting more expensive. It's
Yes.
crazy how they're getting upwards of 2 million now. But the biggest asset your department has is the people. So how am I investing in people? And a lot of piece of that is if they're injured, they can't work, which then affects their physical health, their mental health, if they are away from that locker room type feel. Oh man, I don't even, there's so many areas to be able to hit on here for it. And then, for example, like a staffing shortage is at an all-time high across the country. So there's a vicious cycle between smaller academy classes, a lot more firefighters doing more overtime, which is putting a financial strain on the department, on the firefighters' physical health. We're seeing more injuries physically, mentally, and there's just not as many resources in the fire service. Funding has gone down ever since 2009 across the country. And it's really hard to be innovative and forward thinking when you're just trying to be able to keep the current members that you have and try and keep your head above water. And a big piece of that is first responders, firefighters, police officers, you're tactical athletes. The work you do is physically demanding. I did the firefighter for a day for a fall and sweat out 7 pounds. You're chopping wood, pulling ladders, pulling hose. And even if your buddy goes down in a fire, you have to be able to pull them out. Patients are only getting heavier. So now it's more important than ever that you need to be able to be at your top physical condition, or at least be physically fit, not just obviously for yourself and your health, but for those other out there who you're serving. And I think it's humans in general have this behavior. I do feel we're a very flawed species. We're always very reactive instead of proactive when it comes to a lot of things. And it's hard to see sometimes that someone has to wait for a heart attack to happen to start eating cleaner and exercising. So it's how can we look at the patterns that society has and look to be able to break those, almost like learning the lesson without having to bear the scar there. So how do we help get members in within a day to see an orthopedic specialist if they tear the rotator cuff, get them an MRI in a day, get them surgery within a week? Because that helps the department, it helps the individual, it helps finances, it helps everybody involved. Just believe it's the right thing to do for the right people. First responders are out there 24/7, 365. So we do the exact same. We realize that they have to support their families too. If they're not working, then their family is not maybe bringing the income that they want, or they can't work their second jobs. So it's not just getting them back to work, it's getting them back to their lives. And we even help do the same service for their kids, retirees, administrative staff, everyone involved in the department. Plenty of firefighters' kids get hurt in a soccer game on a Saturday of their knee, or retiree slips on the ice in the winter. And you don't want to just get a firefighter to retirement. You want them to live a healthy retirement.
Yeah, one of the things that has impacted me greatly when you start talking about that retirement, we did a kind of an informal survey just in the department I work for, and we've got at the time we were right about a little less than 300 members, and we have a spaghetti dinner once a year for the retirees, and everybody gets to see their old friends, and we put this survey out in front of them, and we ask, okay, how many of you guys have had a cancer diagnosis since retirement? Not while you were on shift, but since retirement. Do you know what the percentage was that we had that had a active cancer diagnosis or have just came off of one?
I'm scared to hear the number.
33%, 1/3 of our retirees. And we're finding that retirees, and I'm just speaking for cancer, and I know there's other factors, but most of them are being diagnosed within 2 to 3 years of retirement. Trust me, when I retire, I want to have plenty of time with my wife, with hopefully grandkids at the point, but and traveling. There's things I want to do,
Yeah.
but if I don't take care of myself now and I don't get the services I need now from doctors and follow up, it doesn't go well. And one of the partners that we work with here through our nonprofit is some guys from a company called SelectWell. They are some of the absolute best in the industry when it comes to doing the diagnostic lab work, the blood work, and they are working very hard at trying to be predictive for things such as cardiac and thyroid.
Mm.
And at our last physical that we had professionally here in Concord, we had full body ultrasounds. We did the spirometry. We were on the bikes. They did full EKGs on us, and they found several guys that had issues that needed to follow up on it. We had one
Mhm.
firefighter had their thyroid removed because they found a lump and it was precancerous, and they were able to get out in front of that. Yes, we tend to be scared to say I love you, and we tend to be scared to go to the doctor. Those are two things that I think we need to change in the fire service. And
Yeah.
when we see organizations like yours that push toward that, it's a good thing. It really is a good thing.
And it's not because people don't want to go. I think it's afraid of because of what you might find.
Yep.
I was talking with the CEO of United Diagnostic Services, Ray Lincoln, last week, and we were at a conference together, and he just does free screenings there for chiefs who are there. And last year, there was a survivor who said, when I was here a year ago, when Ray tested me, I felt fine, didn't feel anything. He tested me and it came back that I had cancer.
Hmm.
I would never have known. If I would not have known, I would have died. And it's just something right there like that's you don't always feel it. That's why it's important to get checked for it, because I'm pretty sure a lot of people want to live to see their grandkids or see their spouse or go travel. And it's just one of those things you're not going to know unless you test. So we'd rather be safe than sorry when it comes to that.
Yeah, no doubt. And it's really awesome to see a young person like you with as much insight as you have, and how much you've obviously learned just by talking to other people. And that's why it's important that messages go out about leadership. It's not just how do you write up your paperwork better when it's disciplinary. It's not just, hey, we need to learn how to throw a ladder better. We need to learn a better way to stack hose. It has nothing to do with that sometimes. It's got to be interpersonal skills. It's how you deal with people. And the mission you are doing, Alec, is absolutely one of the most important out there. And I encourage you to keep doing what you're doing. And I look forward to listening to a few more of your episodes and seeing where you go. But if folks want to get up with you, a very intelligent young man, where can they find you at? What's the best ways to get a hold of you?
Yeah, LinkedIn is the best, so I'm very responsive on there. It's just my name is Alec, Alec. Last name's Wands, Wons, like the word snow spelled backwards. My email is awands@readyrebound.com. Just ready, like you're ready to go, and then rebound, like in basketball. So awands@readyrebound.com. And those are two easy ways to reach out to me. And just leaving with kind of like a golden nugget. It was maybe this is common knowledge to everyone else, but when I was talking with a lot of the chiefs about leadership, it's always how is the chief serving his firefighters and his command staff? So how do his firefighters be able to serve the community properly? It's almost like the book Leaders Eat Last is they realize that the community is the top of the pyramid. And when you build those community engagement efforts, when you're out there on the good times, just as well the bad, people feel more comfortable with you there and are more likely to be able to like your job is prevention, because the best fires will never happens in the first place. So how can you get people to be able to get a fire blanket or know how to use a fire extinguisher so maybe you don't have to report to a call or it be as severe? Or on the law enforcement side, someone to be able to phone in something that looks suspicious. So it's how do you help serve the community? How do you help serve those around you? And that's one of the biggest things I've picked up from leaders in my nuggets there. But yeah, LinkedIn is probably the easiest way. And I appreciate you having me on here today. I love what you're doing to help support the mission of cancer awareness. I think it's definitely needed as we're only seeing more first responders get cancer and not that many are even getting tested right now. So I'm hoping that this at least inspires someone to at least go take a look.
Yep, no doubt, no doubt. But I do have a golden nugget that I picked up that I would like to share with you today.
Please.
I have a question for you. Do you know what you call fake spaghetti?
I actually haven't heard this. I don't know.
Impasta.
All
See,
right.
I warned you about the bad jokes. And everything is so serious in this world. And people often wonder, why do you tell a terrible joke? Because the world stinks sometimes,
Mhm.
and we just have to laugh about it. And I appreciate you taking time to give us some wisdom today at a young age, and look forward to talking to you again before too long.
Sounds good.
All
I
right.
appreciate you and what you do.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you. And Alec, thank you for being with us. And as we always sign off here on our podcast, ignite your fire within.